Welcome to 5 Good Minutes. You're listening to today's inspirational message on the book of Mark with Kurt Bjorklund.
Before we move to the second story in Mark 2, I want to just sit in Mark 2 for a moment and see something about the friends who brought their paralytic friend to Jesus. And this is potentially a little bit of a reach from what's intended in the text. But I think we see here that these friends brought somebody to Jesus who could not come on his own because the crowds, because of the way it was situated. And so they go up on this roof and they clear a hole and they lower the man through. And what we see in this man was that there was a concern for their friend. So many times, people who are moralistic or self-righteous lose concern for actual individuals and are more concerned with being proved right. Sometimes what they want is not somebody to come to Jesus, but somebody to be shown to be somehow less than ideal follower. And these men simply said, we want our friend not to admit and be shamed because he's a paralytic, and therefore we think, as the culture may have thought, that means he's sinful and so he needs to grovel in it. They just simply said, get this man to Jesus and he can be healed. And then there was a conviction about Jesus, that Jesus could heal their friend, that Jesus could address it. And then there was a cooperation where they didn't simply come saying, well, we can't do it, but they together worked. We don't know how many friends. Many have assumed there were 4 because one on each side. It could have been a different number. At least I don't believe the text says exactly how many. But it's something that could not be done simply alone. And one of the ways that people come to Jesus is through cooperation. So it involves a real concern for people, a conviction about Jesus, cooperation. And then there was a sense of courage where they were willing to step outside of their little cultural norms and say, we will creatively find a way to get our friend to Jesus, even if it could be looked at as being a little off-putting to some of the other religious crowd. And so there's this beauty here of seeing what it is that Jesus could do, and the courage to say, how do we get somebody to Jesus? So let me ask you today, if you are a follower of Jesus, do you have concern for individuals, a conviction about what Jesus can do? Are you willing to work with some others to see how you can bring people to Jesus? And do you have the courage to step out of your safety? Because it is Jesus who says, son, your sins are forgiven. And even though the religious people say that blasphemes, that is somehow wrong, Jesus says, I want you to know, so get up and walk. And he takes this miracle moment and pushes for somebody to understand his power and his divinity. You know, I don't know what your thought is on evangelism. I cited last year in a weekend service that some 40% of millennial Christians believe that it's morally wrong to tell somebody that they need to trust in Jesus because that's considered somehow to be a proselytizing faith. And what that belies is that there's a conviction that says Jesus isn't sufficient. Jesus isn't needed. Jesus is superfluous. And your goodness is enough. And what this passage says is your goodness isn't enough. Your life isn't enough. Jesus alone is. And so there's a willingness to risk and to step forward to say, how do we help other people come to Jesus?
Thanks for joining us here today. There's a lot of great content to explore on Orchard Hill Plus and on the Orchard Hill main feed from the weekend. Have a great day.